Live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1964, Heritage Travel Exploring Your Roots. I think I got that right. Pretty sure I did. Okay, let me go over to my notes. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, and I'm going to go a little bit at a time. And if I keep looking out the door, it's because Zeffie's busy. We just got back from Zeffie's walk, and she's busy acting like a drunk dog right now. She did too much exercise while out walking. Yes, and this is what happens with her. Zeffie! Sounds like she had a food bowl. Anyway, so heritage travel. What is heritage travel? This is exploring destinations that are connected to your family history. It could be visiting ancestral towns, historical sites, or cemeteries. I love walking through cemeteries. And it's engaging with local archives, museums, or cultural heritage centers. There's different ways that you can do this as well. It could be just to go to experience the area that your ancestors came from, or it could be a little more in-depth, like, where is the house that they lived in? Can we see the house that they lived in? Can we knock on the door and have a look inside? And I know people who've done that. I remember living in a house in Haitaitai one time in Wellington, and she's sitting the other side of the curtain. You can see a little pause. And we got a knock on the door one day and opened up the door, and this guy was telling us how he used to live in the house. And he says there's a bedroom right here pointing towards the wall behind the door where the bedroom was, because we're in a one-bedroom place. It had been a house that had been split down the middle, and so there was they converted the other side into a one-bedroom flat. Our side was a one-bedroom flat, and he was describing the house to us, how it was when he was there and how he had spent so many months. She's good. So many months laying in bed in that bedroom due to, I can't remember what he had. It might have been like tuberculosis or something back in the days, because he was talking about, like the 1940s that he lived in the house. So we got the history of the house from this guy. There was one time I went to one place that we lived in a lot of places. One place I used to live in Fielding, and when we had lived there, we had a friend who was a missionary, and she was a very, very good artist. And we had this humongous brick wall. It was tall. It went above the roof of the garage of the house next door, above their garage roof. It was just this massive brick wall that went basically the length of their garage and went taller than the garage, this big concrete block wall. And so my parents had this beautiful coffee table book that had paintings in there of different scenes of New Zealand. And there was this really cool one of Mount Cook, which is our highest peak. And so Dad got all the necessary equipment and all of that for her, found out what paints she wanted, and then she replicated this picture out of the book onto this concrete wall. So, and it was always a cool feature in our backyard, because I loved looking at that. It was nature. It was a mountain. It was, I love mountains. I love trees. I got to see both in the backyard there, and it just gave the backyard a little something special. And so years later, I went back and knocked on the door of the house to ask if I could have a look at the wall. And they said, oh yeah, they said it was getting a little green. So we did power wash it a bit. The painting was still there. It was not as vivid as it had been when I was there. It was a little faded and everything else, but she allowed me to walk into their backyard to take a photograph of it. And then they talked about the changes that they had made in the house and to the house and that sort of stuff as well from when I was living there. I told them how it used to be laid out when I was living there, the alterations that we made when we were living there with putting walls up, taking walls down, even putting on the addition of the back porch area as well. And us kids used to sleep in there when we had guests coming. Guests got the bedrooms. We got the camp stretchers out in the back porch, the closed-in back porch. But it was a great backyard, great veggie garden. That's where we used to go and pull veggies out of the garden and eat, run some off underneath the garden hose, drink out of the garden hose, eat the vegetables that we, like radishes and tomatoes and carrots. And at that time I liked celery. So yes, celery was included. Now I can't stand celery. But it was good to go back to some of these places and just recall the memories of your childhood of living in those places. So you can kind of do that. And I've also been taken to drive past houses that my grandparents grew up in, where they lived and grew up. So I've been taken to those places as well, which is really, really cool. I haven't been to any places overseas where my ancestors have come from, but I have done many of the ones in New Zealand. And it's just really cool to do that. So I've got a trip planned. I just haven't put it on the calendar yet, but I've got a heritage trip planned to go through England, Scotland, and Ireland, and down to Cornwall as well, to visit all places that my great-grandparents came from, my second great-grandparents, even my third great-grandparents came from. And I've found out all their addresses and stuff through census reports. And so I've got this trip planned to go not only sightseeing through the area, but also learning about the history of those areas where my ancestors lived, so I can make more of a connection to who they are and maybe the type of lifestyle that they had then at the time. So this is a really cool way to do that. And you can just go learn the culture of the area and just be like a tourist. But the cool thing about heritage is that you're making it unique. It's not just a regular bus tour. You're actually going there to learn history about the place because that's where your ancestors came from. So now you have a personal connection. So that's one of the benefits of heritage. I'm getting ahead of myself. Benefits of heritage travel is making personal connections to your ancestry. Sometimes when you get to see some of the places that your ancestors have been, have lived, have endured, battlefields that they have fought on, and things like that, it just brings something alive in you. You gain a deeper understanding of the historical and cultural context of the times that your ancestors lived in. And it can also strengthen your family bonds through shared travel experience as well. Take the family with you. I mean, do like a get together, do a family reunion on the road, going and visiting places of your ancestors. I mean, how cool would that be? Get the aunts and the uncles and the cousins together and off you go for a little tiki tour around the places that your ancestors came from. Excuse me. Planning your heritage trip, research ahead, use genealogy tools and records to pinpoint key locations. You want to use census reports for houses that they lived in, birth records for where they were living at the time when your ancestors were born, death certificates to find the cemeteries that they're buried in, so you can go visit their graves. Even the marriage records will tell you where they were living at the time, and what the occupations were and that sort of thing too. Connecting with a local resource like archives, historical societies, and genealogy guides as well to give you more of a personalized tour, even maybe take you into some of the areas where the records are kept so you can get to see some of the records. And be flexible. Be flexible. Be open to unexpected discoveries along the way. It could be that you go into an archives or something and they show you a record and they turn around and says, oh, you need to go to find out more. Like if you ever seen the program, Who Do You Think You Are? They go, to find out more about this, you need to go and visit this site. That could happen on your trip as well. You say like, oh, well, how far away is that cemetery? How far away is that house? And they say, oh, well, if you want, where was that battle held? Well, that battle was held over here. Where would you like to, would you like to go and see it? It's an hour down the road, blah, 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 blah. Be flexible. Memorable activities for heritage travel are things like walking the streets your ancestors once roamed. And that's when you can take like a guided history tour of the area, especially somebody who might be familiar with your genealogy, a genealogist that you've talked to, and they've teamed up with a historian, and the two of them are walking you through the town where your ancestors lived, the streets that they walked on, some of the things that they may have seen on that street, that sort of stuff. Explore local landmarks and the understanding of their significance. Maybe your ancestor had a landmark, like a memorial or something erected for them that you didn't know about. And you get to see it. You get to hear the history behind it. Maybe that memorial might have been significant during your ancestors' time in that place. Sample regional foods that your ancestors may have enjoyed. And there are places around that will do that. Remember when we went to Williamsburg one time, we went to the King's Inn and they did food authentic to the times, like the late 1700s, early 1800s, when Williamsburg was founded. And so you get to try some of the historical recipes and things like that. Of course, some of them have been adjusted for modern day ingredients, but they kept them as authentic as they possibly could. And it was actually kind of really cool and that sort of stuff. We didn't know what we were eating. They could have just, but they were trying to get it as close to the original as possible based on the ingredients that they had available in these modern times compared to what was available back then. Some of them, they actually managed to recreate the dish as it was created back then as well. Some of them even use the same cooking methods, and some of them they can use the modern cooking methods to give you the same taste. So some of them were cooked over fire, which was kind of cool. I love there is something like every time we did barbecues here in the States, it was mostly always done with gas. Yet I always remember the charcoal barbecues. My dad, there's just a flavor that charcoal would put into the meat. And so Brad was very proud of himself one time. He comes home and he'd gone down to buy tomato plants and pots and dirt to put them in because he wanted to grow tomatoes on the back patio area. So he went and got whatever he needed. He says, I bought you something. He said, it only cost me $10. He said, but then I had to buy the accessories to go with it, which cost me more than what the $10 surprise was. And I'm like, okay, what did you get me? He got me a charcoal grill. I don't cook on a grill. He was the grill master. So that evening, so while he got all of that assembled and got his plants done, I raced down to the supermarket to get us some steaks, came home, and then he was able to cook those steaks on the grill that night over charcoal, which is so much better than on a gas grill. So much better. And so with some of these regional foods and stuff, they would cook them over the fire. If you go to New Zealand, there's places that you can go where you can enjoy a hangi. A hangi is a way that food is cooked inside the ground. In a luau, it's very similar to a luau, but in a luau, the fire is on top of the ground and everything is put on top of that and covered. In New Zealand, you dig a pit and the rocks are heated by fire and then put in the bottom of this pit. And then baskets of food are layered inside the pit, and they put the ones that take the longest closest to the rocks, and the ones that take the least amount of time are towards the top. Then they cover it and bury it in it's completely covered in dirt and sacks and all of this sort of stuff. The dirt does not get on the food, but the flavor has a little earth taste to it. And I will tell you, that meat is so tender, it literally melts in your mouth. It is really, really good. So a luau is cooked more above the ground, whereas a hangi is cooked in a pit in the ground with the rocks. There's different methods of cooking, but the food tastes fantastic. If you haven't had a luau and you're in Hawaii, go have a luau, please. It is amazing food. If you're in New Zealand, at least go somewhere where you can try a hangi because they are awesome. The food is incredible. And then if you get the really good ones, they'll do a tour around the little Maori village and you'll get to have a Maori concert and all sorts of cool, fun stuff that shows you the traditions of the Maori. The Tamati Brothers Maori village is the best one to do, in my opinion. Anyway, but you'll get to sample food, how it was cooked back in the day. And it is really good. Let's see. Practical tips for genealogy tourism. Okay. So use tools like Google Maps and archive resources to map out your trip. Prepare digital and printed copies of key family documents for reference. And you don't want to take the originals with you. You want to have copies with you in case anything happens to them. You don't want to be losing them. And these ones, you can laminate them if you're taking them physically with you, have them in those binders that have the archival sleeves in them. If you're doing it digitally and it's on your phone, the only thing I don't like about digital documents on my phone is I can't read them. The screen's too small. If I had the iPad, then yeah, I could put them on that. But sometimes I prefer pen and I prefer paper anyway. I know it takes up space, and I know I would take paper copies because then I can make notes as well. Consider hiring a local guide specializing in family history tours as well. That's the other one too, because they can give you the historical context. And if you're talking to them in advance and you're telling them about your relatives, they may even go and do a little research some of them will go and do some research for you and meet you with information that you may not have about your ancestors. So you get to learn something new about your ancestors as well. And create lasting memories by documenting your journey through journaling, photos, videos. Absolutely a must. Because this will then be used, you can then use it as a family gift later that year. Hey, we went on this trip. This is what we learned about our ancestors, and you put it in a book and you give it away for Christmas or holidays or whatever. Share stories and findings with your family. Invite them over. This is what we used to do back in the day. People would come back from their vacations and they'd have their little slides. And the slides were like little square cardboard thingies about yay big that had a little cut out in the middle that had a negative in it. And that negative you'd put in the slide projector and it'll project the picture up on the wall. And you would hear about their trips and you would go through you'd either go through their photographs or their slides, one or the other. And if they had the 8mm films, you got to watch that too. And of course, because 8mm films didn't have sound, they provided the narration. I love those times. I remember one place we were sitting in and they closed my bed. They draped a sheet over my bedroom door and closed it because it was at the end of the hallway. And then we sat on the floor in the hallway and Dad set up the projector and we watched slides. And these are slides we had seen many times before, but it was just a really cool, fun family night to hear those stories again, to go through the slides and go, oh, I remember when we did that. Hey, isn't that the one that you told us about when we did blah, 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 blah. You know, it's always cool fun. And bring home souvenirs tied to your ancestry. Now, this is always interesting because, well, especially if you're somewhere like Scotland, you could bring home something that's in the, if you came from a clan in Scotland, you could bring home something with the tartan of your clan on it. Even though I haven't been to Scotland, I come from the Ross clan. So I actually have the Ross crest that is mounted on a piece of Ross tartan on a wooden plaque that I ordered and got sent away. I also have a teddy bear who's got the movable joints on them that has on his chest, he has a copy of the Ross tartan with a little white frilly lacy thing. I think he might have it on his paws too. But my mother, we gave her a jewelry box, which was this beautiful wooden jewelry box that was handmade. And then on the top, they had this inlay where they put this padding. Then they covered it in Ross tartan with the Ross family crest right in the middle of this thing. My mother still uses that jewelry box to this day. But it's just something fun. And if I was in Scotland, I would probably go to somewhere and say, make me a kilt, please. Make me something that I can wear to an event. And you've got, I think I've got there's three Ross tartan. There's one's red, one's green, and I think there's another one. There's like the modern tartan, the hunting tartan, and the old tartan, I think, are the three. I'd have to go back and have a look. But I know that there's a modern and an old. Modern, a hunting, and I'm pretty sure the other one's an old tartan, like the traditional tartan. But I've always wanted something made for me, specifically for me, in the tartan, in my Ross clan tartan. So bring home souvenirs. If you're going somewhere where your family is from, find something that is that would remind you. Usually when I go traveling, I bring home fridge magnets and postcards. And the postcards are usually ones without writing on the front of them because their pictures are the best. If I want to see what the picture is, I just turn over and look at the back of the card. And fridge magnets. And I always tie them to something that I did on that trip. And I've got my filing cabinet over here. It's got the side, it's got fridge magnets from all the cruises I've been on, because when you're on a cruise, if you go to their store, they will have a magnet for the ship, and it will have on there like the year, its inaugural year on there. It may have the tonnage of the ship, how many passengers. Sometimes they have a little detail, sometimes they have nothing, just here's the ship and here's the name of the ship, and that's it. I'm trying to have a look and see, but I've got ones for each of the ships I've been on. I've always bought a fridge magnet if they've had one available. I'm trying to think if there's any. The only one I didn't get one on was the Allegra, because they didn't have fridge magnets for their ships. It was a river cruise. It was a Christmas market one. And I saw somebody in their story today had packets of gingerbread from the Christmas markets. Now, these things are not small. They are about this round and about this thick. And you get 4 to 6 in a pack. And they just went down the row, and there's all these different, and you can get them different icings on top. You can get them plain. You can get them with different flavored icings on top. Yeah, it's really good gingerbread. I'm just trying to think. And then I've got other ones that relate to places I have been to and within those countries. Like when I went to the Schomburg Palace, I got a fridge magnet of the Schomburg Palace to remind us that we went there. We had a great time. They even showed us where little secret passages were that the servants would use to move from room to room, because they didn't want them walking the main hallway. So they had them walking these hallways behind the rooms. I'm like, ooh, the stuff you could have seen through there. Because they had little peepholes to look into the room to see if they were able to go into the room, if there's anybody in the room, or if the people that they needed to see were in that particular room. So they had little peepholes. I'm like, man, the stuff you could have seen in there. And that's basically it. So think about places that you want to go. Think about where your ancestors are from. When you're researching your genealogy, you will find where your ancestors came from. So you'll be able to target a few more places and things. Find out that little village. Census reports are great for giving you addresses. If they don't have census reports, look for electoral rolls. I know if you're in New Zealand, you'll get electoral rolls. You can look up addresses in those to see where they lived at certain times. You can go driving past the places, and like I know how to get to my grandfather's house in Dunedin. I know how to get to that. And what was really funny about the first time we went past that house, it was a little dead-end street. And so Dad drove down the street and Mum said, that's the house. And it was the second one in from the corner. And that's the house that Papa lived in. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. What is this old, like 1930s house? And it was a really cute little blue house with a single garage out front. And so Dad went down the end of the street, turned around, we came back, and we stopped so we could stop and took pictures of it from inside the car. And then we went out and we turned right, and we had to climb this hill to get to where he was. Then we turned out and went to the right. And there was this guy with his head poking over the top of the hedge, like looking to see what's going on there. And I turned around and went, there's Corky. Now, Corky is a character from a British TV series called The Sykes, Sykes. And Corky is the policeman. And this guy whose head was over the fence looked exactly like Corky from the TV series Sykes. So then later on, it was either a few weeks later, we're at my grandparents' place, and I said to Papa, I says, oh, we went by your house and had a look. And then we went around the corner and we turned to the right. Now, Papa's house was here, the house next door was here, and the guy, Corky, was in this house behind the one on the corner. And he was also on the corner. And I said, this, we went from your place, there was the house on the corner, then the one behind it. And I said, there was this guy poking his head over the hedge, and it looked like Corky from Sykes. And he turns around and says, do you want to know something really? And I says, do you want to know something about that? And I go, what's that? And he goes, his last name is actually Sykes. And I'm like, really? And this is something my grandfather told me. And he goes, yeah. And had you gone and knocked on the door and told them who you were, he would have invited you in for a cup of tea. You never know. And I was like, that is so cool. But of course, if I went back there now, he wouldn't be there anymore. Because this was years ago. Yeah, this was a long time ago. He probably won't be around anymore. Yeah. But I thought that was really cool that this guy that looked like Corky from Sykes, his last name was actually Sykes, and he would have given us a cup of tea had we gone and knocked on the door and told him who we were. I don't know if my parents ever went back, when they went back to Dunedin, if they ever went and knocked on his door or not, don't know. But I do know that my parents, when traveling through England, went to the manor house in Warboys and spoke with the owner at the time, who took them on a tour through the house, showing apparently the owners before this owner had modernized the house some and put all this Italian stuff in there, and he spent time restoring it back to how it was. So he took out all this Italian marble, all this Italian tiling, furniture, decors, everything went out, and he put in more appropriate English stuff, English furnishings, decor, and all that, and kind of took it back to how it used to be. But he had also researched the house, and he had actually written up this pamphlet about the house. It was regular paper, and it was about, I think it's like about 8 pages long or something, including photographs of the house and the barn out the back. And he talked about the people who had owned the house and all this sort of stuff. And so he had done this history thing. And then my mum and dad added at the back of that some of the photographs they had taken when they were there, including the ones from the graveyard, because in front of the manor house there was the church. And in the church there was a graveyard there where some of my ancestors are buried. And so they went and took pictures of all the headstones and tombstones and everything. And so I now have one of those, it's a, one of those books that just has sleeves in it. So it has archival sleeves in it. And in the front part of the book is a copy of, my mum photocopied the book my great aunt had, which was a copy of all the letters that I'm trying to remember if she was an aunt or a cousin, that Patty Eakins had written to whoever she had written of, and they created this book with it. And it's this little tiny book about yay big, about this. And so my mother had borrowed one of the original copies from my great aunt and photocopied it all for myself. And I don't know who else in the family she did copies for as well, but she put it into this was a Christmas present one. Yeah, it was the best Christmas present ever. She put all of this into this plastic book. Then she had the information from the manor house when they had gone to tour it. And then behind that, they had photographs that they had taken. So I now have this manor house book, which has the letters that Patty C. Eakins wrote. And she wrote about her life living in the manor house, and then later on in Cambridge when they moved out of the manor house. Then it had the information, the history about the manor house, and then it had photographs my parents had taken, all in this one book. It is one of the best Christmas presents. It was either a Christmas present or a birthday present. It was one of the best gifts I ever got given. My family history in a different way, from letters. And so my parents have been to the manor house, and I'm trying to think where else they have been that our ancestors are from. But I know they did that one. But how cool is that to go and visit a house that your ancestors came from, and to walk through the rooms that they would have walked through at some point in time, and learn about what life was like at the time, because, it was a working farm. And so you learn about the farm life and all of that. And their church was right in their front yard. Literally, you had a driveway goes down. The church is here. You go down the driveway, and there's the manor house and the barns and the outhouses and all that sort of stuff. So I'd love to go visit there, and I'd love to go down to Cornwall and visit some of the places that ancestors have come from down there as well. And I have a huge connection down to Cornwall. Yeah, I painstakingly went through my tree and said, well, this goes back to my 10th great grandfather, who was from Cornwall, and all of his kids up to a certain point before they moved to New Zealand. And they said, oh, no, we need somebody closer. And I said, well, you said you wanted, how far back do you go? And he says, no, we need to know as close as possible. And I think the closest one I had was a great-grandfather. But I had a couple of, I had second great-grandfathers, third great-grandparents, my second great-grandparents, third great-grandparents, and one of them was like a great-grandparent. And I said, but then they all immigrated to New Zealand. He goes, oh, you're from New Zealand? You're in. Funny, you just asked that question on the thing anyway. But anyway, so that's all we have for today. My question for you is, what dream destination connected to your ancestry would you love to visit and why? I want to go through England, Scotland, Ireland, and Cornwall to see where my ancestors came from. So it gives me a deeper connection and deeper understanding of what it was like when they were living there. It gives me a deeper sense of purpose of where I came from. Because, we're all part of our ancestors. We have, somebody did a thing the other day. How many generations did that one go back? I've got to go find it again. They did it was all done like a Christmas, it looked like a Christmas tree with how many generations that you had and all of that sort of stuff. And it went back multiple generations, but there was it equaled 1 million people by the time you got back to whatever it was. So yeah, that was kind of crazy. 1 million people for me to be here today. So I want to go learn as much as I can about these people and go and see if I can find any original records as well. So part of the thing of planning my trip is also planning to visit parishes and archives and things and let them know I'm coming, because they are more likely to have the stuff ready for you when you arrive than if you just turn up and go, oh, we'd like to have a look at your parish records, please. And they'll go, no, I'm sorry. We don't have time to go research them right now. That if you give them plenty of notice of when you're coming, and by plenty of notice, I'm talking 2 to 3 months in advance, maybe more. The better, the more time they have, the better. And let them know that we're coming to this particular parish. We're going to be visiting here. We believe our second great-grandfather, third great-grandparents or something were born there, married there, whatever. Give them the names, the dates, the times, and that you'd like to have a look at their parish records and see if they're in the parish records. And then they're more willing to help you because you've given them notice rather than just turning up and going, we want to have a look at your parish records for this year. And they go, I'm sorry, no. So anyway, with that, I'm out of here. Go out and have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, konera.